Please welcome to the stage the director of the Entertainment Technology Center at Carnegie Mellon University and the founding editor of ETC Press and its Well Played series, Drew Davidson.
Wow. Thanks, everyone. I know we're running on, so I'm going to get off stage really quickly. I just wanted to introduce the Well Played series. Well Played is about doing close analysis of video game moments to really unpack what makes a video game work and make it a powerful, unique experience besides other media. But our challenge with Games for Change, I think I'll talk about it some tomorrow, but with this presentation with Ralph Vituccio is, can we take that model and really look at something above and beyond games? So Ralph's going to do the first Well Played session that's not focused on a game. He's going to focus on a immersive journalism piece, but I'll let Ralph tell you more about it. Ralph.
Thank you. Thank you, Drew. All right, my name's, like Drew says, Ralph Vituccio. I'm a professor at Carnegie Mellon University. Can we get the power on there? Good. And besides teaching at CMU, I also am an independent, I do documentary films and interactive stuff. The two on the left are my two recent documentaries. The one on the right is actually an interactive art installation piece that was commissioned by the Havana International Art Biennale last year in Cuba. So I do a little bit of both. But anyway, today I'm going to talk about Project Syria. And it's an unusual, as Drew says, that for me to come out and do Well Played with an immersive VR, virtual reality project. Because, you know, virtual reality is an isolated experience. I mean, you can watch it on the screen, which some people call flatties, you know, to people in VR, two-dimensional images. But anyway, Nani De La Pena is the creator of Project Syria, an immersive experience. Nani was at UCLA and has her own group now called the Embodiment Group, where she does a lot of these immersive journalism experiences. She's called the godmother of virtual reality. She's sort of pioneering this new form. Her and Chris Milk, also from Verse, are doing a lot of work in this area as well. Some pretty fascinating stuff coming out of those two extremely creative people. Project Syria was commissioned by the World Economic Forum to help tell the plight of 1 million children fleeing Syria in civil war. The piece was displayed at the World Economic Forum with the idea of compelling world leaders to act on this crucial issue. So what is immersive journalism? Well, according to Nani's words, immersive journalism is using game platforms and VR environments for news stories. CGI scenarios, creating real live, from real live video events or audio and creating CGI environments around those. And giving you unprecedented access to these sort of stories unfolding before your eyes in this immersive space. So the question I want to ask, and this is one of the things that Nani talks about a lot, and also Chris Milk, is virtual reality the ultimate empathy machine? And this is something they've been talking a lot about, and this is a question I want you to think about. And I'm not going to answer the question. I'm going to talk a little bit about it and give some critique on it, why maybe it does work, maybe VR is an ultimate empathy machine, and maybe it's not. But anyway, Nani goes on to say that virtual reality is the visceral empathy generator. It can make people feel in a way that nothing else, no other platform can. Chris Milk also believes in that. Chris Milk also has said, and if you are familiar with Chris Milk, he's the founder and CEO of Verse, just incredibly creative person working in virtual reality today. He believes it's not a video game peripheral. It connects humans to each other in profound ways. It can change our lives and perceptions of each other's. It has the potential to change the world. Some big statements there. He also goes on to say that VR can make us more compassionate people, can make us more empathetic to each other, more connected with each other, and ultimately more human. And that's some big statements there for a technology that is still in its infancy right now. Anyway, Roger Ebert a few years ago said the same thing about film. Movies are the ultimate empathy machine as well. And when I go to a movie, I can live someone else's lives, walk in someone else's shoes, become a different gender, different race. And I think the last statement is the key here to a lot of whether VR is is the ultimate empathy machine and how it's being used in that purpose. Is great movies enlarge us. They civilize us. They make us more decent people. And I think that could be true for great VR productions as well. Because you know, and I know, there's a lot of garbage out there, and you have to wade through a lot of bad stuff to get to the stuff that really impacts us and changes society. And that's why this organization, Games for Change, is doing this. Games that can cause change in our society. Not just to entertain, not just to kill more zombies or more monsters or level up or whatever, but to change us for the better. Anyway, so I want to let Lonnie speak a little bit about what she does. There's a brief video of her, and I'd like her to say it in her own words.
Everything you're about to hear when you put on these virtual reality goggles and when you walk through this space really happened. And I hope people don't feel daunted when they walk by and they see this strange equipment, because believe it or not, this is going to make you feel like you're actually there, actually witnessing a real scene. It's an extraordinary opportunity to be building an immersive journalism piece about Syrian children refugees. This is one of the most pressing issues of our time. We make these pieces because we can put you on scene, make you feel like you're a witness to an actual event. You're not separated by a television or a screen, or you actually feel like you're there. I started as a print journalist, and then I became a documentary filmmaker. And so I took all that knowledge in my traditional journalistic skills and married it with my love of technology, and that's where the idea of immersive journalism came from. While the process is very journalistic, it's slightly different than, say, a broadcast journalist or a print journalist, in that I have to start with audio that was captured on scene. Very difficult to recreate the feelings that one has when you're listening to evocative audio that was recorded at a real scene, at a real crisis. So when I begin these pieces, I need to start there. You start with what's the subject matter about, and how do I get the right audio from which to build. Using this material, I then have to start thinking about what do we construct? We have to have the scene. So we need to have models with photorealistic textures built into the models. We've had to very carefully reconstruct through photographs, through video, using specific photographic textures, using 3D models that are made from real people's images to try to make you understand what it's like to be there, what's happening for Syrian refugee children. More than a third of Syrians have been displaced by this war. Over 52% of the refugees from Syria are children. And the reason we spend so much time on this recreation, rather than have you watch a video or listen to the audio standing alone by itself, is because of this astonishing sense of presence that this technology affords. You feel like you're actually there. You feel like you're a witness to this event. And if we can make people understand how difficult these circumstances are, perhaps they can actually start to think about what kind of change that they too can help bring about.
So when I spoke to Nani and asked her about sending me the actual VR project, it's on Vive. She goes, yeah, I can send you the download, and you need a Vive. And I'm thinking, okay, but if I do that, and since this is one of those VR experiences where you're not supposed to be seated, you're walking around, and I'd have to send out, you know, you're kind of walking around, you have to move around in order to get the experience. I'd have to do a lot of springing and a lot of head-mounted displays. And even if I did do that, you'd still be seated in the chair. You wouldn't be able to move around. So kind of, so the second best case scenario is to show a two-dimensional image. And the 2D image is right here. This is Syria. Now imagine, Project Syria, imagine you are wearing your headset and you can look around everywhere. And this is only a 3-minute experience, 3.5-minute experience. So here's the virtual reality Project Syria immersive journalism piece here.
كان من الحرية حار A third of all Syrians have been displaced by the war. Reports indicate children have been specifically targeted in the violence. Food supplies for Syrians seeking shelter in refugee and makeshift camps have become severely strained. There are now over 1 million refugee children. And the number of refugees has been growing exponentially.
So the idea then comes up is, can a project like this create empathy and make us feel enough to actually act upon a situation as terrible and as serious as this? And that's the big question. So what is empathy? Let's talk a little bit about empathy, I guess. We have to decide what that is and think about it. So dictionary definition of empathy: ability to understand and share the feelings of another. The capacity of place oneself in another's position. To walk in someone else's shoes. We've heard that saying, for years. I've heard it since childhood. Walk in someone else's shoes before you understand what they really are and what they really feel like. I found this really interesting video by Dr. Brene Brown, who talks about empathy. It's a short little piece. I think it's interesting. She makes a distinction. I've been talking to a lot of people about empathy, and there seems to be some confusion between empathy and sympathy. And I think Dr. Brown has a nice definition of the two.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, "I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed." And then we look and we say, "Hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone." Sympathy is, "Ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich?" Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb. but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So empathy, again, getting back to this word, what is it and how can technology help us to be more empathetic and more connected? Well, there's a lot of research that's been going on recently about that, a lot of neuroscience. One of the things that some neuroscientists have found is a thing called mirror neurons. Some believe that there is an existing thing in our head, a new type of neuron that helps us explain how we learn through mimicry and why we can empathize with other people. It's a great cartoon, I think, that sort of emphasizes that. So really what it is, in the sense of mirror neurons, is this whole idea of monkey see, monkey do. And there's been a lot of research done on this area, and unfortunately not on a lot of human beings, but mostly on monkeys, chimpanzee. A research scientist, Marco Iacoboni from UCLA, argues that the mirror neuron systems in the brain will help us understand actions and intentions and could provide this neural basis for imitation and empathy. However, there's a lot of people who feel, and I think I saw another talk about Wired magazine. Someone said about Wired always shuts down some of the research going on, but it is. A lot of neuroscientists believe it's over-exaggerated, oversimplified hype, media hype, swallowed whole by the media, and while it's an exciting discovery, most of the research, all the research, in fact, has been done sort of in primates. So it's skeptical whether mirror neurons is the magic bullet for empathy or not. That's still yet to be decided. There's a lot of other research going on, particularly called Embodiment Hypothesis, where our physical experiences influence our logic and our meaning, our semantic representation and processing of the world. In other words, the mind and body are very separate. They're not together, as opposed to what Descartes used to say. The mind is not separate from the body, but a lot of research are saying, yes, it is very separate from the body. In fact, a lot of people believe the body hijacks the mind. The body is integrated with the mind as a representational system. In some ways, the body is a primordial display device. So what happens in our body affects how we think. And if you think about it, it's true, in a very simplistic way. And in this sense of, this embodiment theory sense kind of plays out in this other sort of experiment called the rubber hand illusion. I don't know if anybody's ever seen it or heard of it, but it's a pretty interesting piece I want to play for you right now.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Larry.
Hi, Edie.
Very nice to meet you, Edie. We're going to do a little demonstration here called the rubber hand illusion. It's going to be a little scary.
This illusion may look like fairground fun, but it reveals one of the most important new ideas in brain.
Can you turn up the sound, please?
Right there. Good. And can you put this hand down right over here and just curl it up like the rubber hand's curled up a little bit? All right. Now, what I'm going to do is try to position the rubber hand so it looks like it's your own.
Okay.
Okay, could you imagine that being your own hand, kinda?
Yeah.
What we're going to do is we're going to stroke your fingers simultaneously, the rubber finger and your real finger, and hopefully this will convince you that the rubber hand is your own, that your brain will actually adopt this hand.
In the illusion, simply watching the rubber hand being stroked at the same time as the real hand is enough to trick the brain into adopting it as its own.
We like weird. And slowly but surely, you should feel that the hand you're looking at is actually part of your body.
Feels like you're touching my hand with that one.
Right, so it feels like this is your hand that I'm
Yes.
touching, right?
Yes.
You okay?
Yeah.
Good. Try that at home with your kids. Yeah. The rubber hand illusion is a wonderful example of how multisensory perception can influence how we perceive our own body. I mean, that's how deep multisensory perception runs. When you hold your hand out, it's generally thought that you know it's there because of the information you're getting from your muscles and your tendons and that sort of thing. But what the rubber hand illusion does is show how that can be overridden by visual information. Okay,
The rubber
here comes your
hand
fun
illusion
surprise.
shows the powerful connection between what we see and what we feel. But it reveals even more than simply the way our senses are connected. It hints that a fundamental change in the brain is taking place.
Whoa!
Isn't that strange?
Yeah, that's creepy.
So what might be going on in the rubber hand illusion is that the brain is actually changing to accommodate the new rubber hand, going through some sort of, structural change that we call neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity.
So this sense of embodiment is something and is a very powerful thing to start thinking about with virtual reality and using VR. And this idea of immersion and this idea of creating empathy in an experience, in a VR experience. The Stanford Virtual Human Interaction Lab is doing a lot of interesting things with embodiment here. For example, they have one experiment where students experience what it might feel like to be a cow. So as a cow, you're in the pasture, eating, everything's nice, everything's wonderful, whatever. Loaded onto a truck, taken to a slaughterhouse, and cut apart. Right? So, and they're looking at seeing how powerful this could be to create some sort of empathy in humans, how they may feel towards eating beef. So among those who experienced life as a cow, several said they would make them think twice about eating beef. Others, however, said it would not change their dietary habits at all. So, so what he's really interested in is experiencing this theory of experimenting with this theory of empathy and seeing how embodiment can really change our perceptions, change our lives, change our views about the world and each other. So some interesting things going on in science and neuroscience, particularly with these. And I think it's going to play out. I think the virtual reality, people who work in VR, I think really would help them to look at this stuff and start thinking more about this stuff and with the science that's going on, to provide them some sort of some foundation, some sort of benchmark to move from and to create from. Another sort of distinction between coherence and immersion, also in creating empathy and believability, is this idea of immersion versus coherence. Immersion is somewhat easier to create as the technology becomes better through low persistent screens, low latency head tracking, high frame rates, and this is what you hear always about. When you listen to most VR talks, they're talking about the technology. And they're talking about whether you feel sick or whatever in VR. But you don't hear much about cohesion in VR experiences. And cohesion kind of gets back into that mental model that maintains that sort of logical, it's like film. If a film is not coherent in its storytelling, you get lost. In VR, whether it's an uncanny valley sort of thing or whatever, it breaks the reality of it. It breaks your immersion, it breaks your coherence to the story. So, and he goes on, Richard Skarbez, the researcher at Chapel Hill, goes on, does a lot of research in this area, goes on to say that most breaks in coherence are due to break into presence and coherence. That while you can recover from it, it does take some time to do it. So that's through some of the neuroscience and research behind whether VR can be empathy machines and how it could or could not be. In relationship to the World Economic Forum and Nani de la Pena's work, Project Syria, showing it to these elites, and also to Chris Milk's VR experience, Clouds Over Sidra, which also was presented at the World Economic Forum, Janet Murray had this to say about it. Were the global elite wearing headsets to look at refugees in a UN-sponsored VR doc, or were they experiencing an expansion of empathy as or it was claimed by the filmmakers, or were there simply a sense of excitement and novelty at a new tech gadget? And that's a big question. I don't know. Well, I don't know. I'll leave that for you to answer. It's a hard one to answer. What's real and what's really creating empathy, particularly now in the newer days, in the founding of this sort of the birth of virtual reality. I mean, VR has been around for years. We know that, but now it's at a point where it's actually viable. It's actually, the promises are starting to come true a little bit of what it can do. So it's a good question. Whether the new tech, whether the gadgetry, whether the newness of it wears off, and whether we become more empathetic with it, more in tune to it, or whether it becomes just another gadget in our repertoire. Another way to isolate ourselves in some cases, to feel about the world, which is interesting. You go back to film and Roger Ebert's comment about film being a great empathy machine. Well, if you think about film, also, for the most part, you watch it with people, for the most part. Nowadays, you don't. Sometimes you watch it on your computer by yourself. But it was always a collaborative, we watched it with a group of people, and you felt it with a group of people. With VR, you're isolated. It's all you. You're all by yourself, watching this, this augmented reality, or this recreated reality, I should say. The other thing to question about empathy in VR is diversity in empathy. How does one's cultural, moral, and religious mindset either enhance or stymie it? It's a pretty interesting question to ask, too, because I think it changes across different people, or how we're brought up, how we think. You think about, I'll be a little crass here and say, put a VR set on on Donald Trump and talk, about the, Mexicans, or see if you can create empathy with him on that one, or some of his followers. And that's, again, I should get political, but I'm sorry. For you Trump supporters out there, I'm sorry. Don't throw stuff at me. But anyway, so another person, a woman artist, has this to say, which I think is has always been a case with any kind of art form that has been powerful, video art particularly. It always gets adopted by the mainstream media at some point. So it's a warning sign, she says, and she says that VR promises to be the empathy machine, but what if things aren't that simple? VR is a political act. It's capitalism. Customer is king. So I don't think necessarily that large corporations, and I won't name them, you could probably fill in the blanks, I think their main concern is not to create a world of understanding, but to create money for themselves and their shareholders. I think that's pretty much fair to say without being too crazy about it. And if they do produce good entertainment, then fantastic. We get back to what Roger Ebert had to say. The great movies will change us and will affect us and impact us in profound ways. And I think hopefully, and I am most of the times that guy sees the glass as half full. Sometimes I see it as half empty. I call it a realist. I'm a realist. I see it both ways sometimes. But I think that those companies that will produce some fantastic VR experiences that will and can change the world. So that's an interesting point to think about as well. You may remember this movie. It's called Strange Days. I don't know, has anybody seen it? Yeah, all right. So this is a dystopian view of virtual reality. I want to run for you guys a little bit.
Have you ever wire tripped?
You ready?
This is not like TV, only better. This is life. It's a piece of somebody's life. It's about the stuff that you can't have, right? The forbidden fruit. Straight from the cerebral cortex. I mean, you're there, you're doing it, you're feeling it. Are you beginning to see the possibilities here? I am your main connection to the switchboard of souls. I'm the magic man.
If it's got something to do with the wire, sooner or later it washes up on your beach.
Fan mail from some flounder?
It's the dark end of the street. How do you like it now?
So that's, again, it's sort of a bleak dystopian version of what's VR. And you think about it, the porn industry has embraced VR, and it's to the nth degree, and working on it and doing a lot of amazing things. Not that I've watched any of it, I'm saying, but they are. I mean, the porn industry does that in any new technology. We all know that. And also selling, advertising. You can imagine the advertising firms are getting VR not to change your mind, but to get you to buy something or get you to, to put money into something, whatever. Again, capitalism. But anyway, there are people working and doing some fantastic. This is a project I I led with my students at Carnegie Mellon. And it was sort of influenced by the Michael Brown incident. And it's called Injustice. It's about racial profiling. This is a little promo piece about it. And let me run this for you.
Don't see anybody on my way to the gym. Guess you must be going someplace else. You don't look too gym ready.
I don't work out much.
There's nothing in here. Most of the important stuff's at the gym.
There's been an incident in the area, and I need to see your identification.
I mean, you gonna ask anybody else for that?
Stay still! Stay still!
Why are you doing this? You cannot do this to me.
What do they think they're doing?
Stop!
Get away!
Want to get out.
Are you with him?
Stop.
How do you know this guy? Is he with you?
Yeah, he was just standing here.
Hands up now.
Please.
So this project was, again, done in 15 weeks. It's a short one semester project, and they really, it's pretty amazing what they accomplished. If anybody's going to be at SIGGRAPH this year, they showed it at Tribeca actually, and the new media section, and it's going to be this on display at SIGGRAPH this year as well. So check it out if you're there. And it's made the rounds. But I wanted to say about this project that this actually makes me believe that virtual reality it has a huge impact on people. And again, it depends on the person, and it depends on what's going on as well. I know that some people I've run through this project, they take it off and I say, how does it make you feel? And a couple people say, it's all right. Other people, I've run it through. We had a young woman who went through it, and she took the headset off, and one of my said question all the time is, well, how did it make you feel? And she broke down crying. She was that affected by it that she actually was of course, it could have been, the Ferguson thing was in the news. There was so much of the news going around about police brutality, so I'm sure that may have kind of lent her sensitivity to it, but she actually broke down, and she sobbed for a while. She thought that was that powerful. So it's one of those things where I've seen it work to this degree where you go, wow, this is unbelievable. And I've also seen it where people go, it's all right, I don't, like that. So I don't know. So the question I want to leave you all with is virtual reality the ultimate empathy machine? I want you to think about that. Will it help us become more compassionate, more connected, more human? And I will tell you, I'll start off by answering that question myself, personally speaking, by saying, well, that all depends. That all depends. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you.